Introduced all the way back in Yugioh GX as a major antagonist, Yubel eventually debuted as a playable card in Phantom Darkness. While not belonging to an archetype at the time, Konami eventually saw fit to release an archetype based around Yubel, as well as retraining many signature monsters. Now a competent archetype composed of fiends with 0 attack and defense, Yubel has already made a decent splash in the format in both pure and mixed versions, using its themes of self-destruction and damage reflection to great effect. Getting to the list, we start off with a copy of the original Yubel. This level 10 fiend cannot be destroyed by battle, and you take no battle damage from battles involving it, effects that will be shared between all future Yubels. If it is attacked while it's in attack position, it inflicts damage to your opponent equal to the attack of the monster, and during the end phase, you must either tribute a monster or destroy Yubel. Finally, if it is destroyed except by its own effect, it can special summon Yubel Terra Incarnate from your hand, deck, or graveyard, which has almost identical effects except it's a level 11 fiend. These effects can situationally be useful, but aside from the floating effects, we won't really be using them too often, and we mostly run them just to enable some cards that require them. For instance, Spirit of Yubel, a level 10 fiend that has the usual Yubel effects, and if it is destroyed, it can special summon the original Yubel that is banished in your hand, deck, or graveyard. If special summoned, Spirit of Yubel adds to your hand or sets from your deck a spell or trap that mentions Yubel, and when an opponent's monster declares an attack, it can special summon itself from your hand. Spirit of Yubel might seem unimpressive, but its effects synergize extremely well with the rest of the deck, which has plenty of ways to both destroy and special summon it. One of our main ways to do so is Samsara D Lotus, a level 1 fiend that can tribute itself to special summon a Yubel monster from our deck. In addition, if you control Yubel during your end phase, it can special summon itself from the graveyard or add itself to your hand. And if you control a Yubel monster during your opponent's turn, it can tribute itself when a monster effect is activated to change the effect to destroy a Yubel monster on the field. This provides us with what is essentially a monster negate with upside, although keep in mind your opponent does choose which Yubel to destroy. Similarly, we have Infernal Grave Squabber, which if you control a fiend monster has the quick effect to special summon itself from the hand, then it can destroy a monster we control that is Yubel or mentions it. It can also banish itself from the graveyard to special summon a fiend monster with 0 attack or defense from your hand or graveyard. Not much else to say here, just an incredible extender that helps us trigger our destruction effects. We also run a few non-Yubel monsters, for instance Dark Beckoning Beast, which when normal summoned can add a Uriah, Reveal, Hormone, or card that mentions them from our deck to our hand, and gives us an additional normal summon of a fiend with 0 attack and defense. Just a solid starter, and the cards it searches synergize well with our deck. Well, except for Chaos Summoning Beast, which we just run as a searchable body to normal summon. Lastly, we have Unchained Soul Shavara, which during the main phase has the quick effect to target a fiend or face down card we control to destroy it and special summon itself, but it does lock us into special summoning fiend monsters while we control it. It also has an effect when sent to the graveyard to set an unchained spell or trap from our deck, but in this version we're only running it as a searchable way to trigger the destruction effects of our cards. As for our hand traps, we have Maxi, Ash Blossom, and Nibiru, which has particularly good synergy with our effects that we'll get into later. As for spells and traps, we begin with our fail spell Nightmare Throne, which when activated can take a fiend monster with 0 attack and defense from our deck and either add it to our hand or destroy it. Once per turn, if a face-up Yubel monster you control leaves the field by a card effect, you can add a Yubel monster that is 1 level higher or lower than it from your deck, graveyard, or that is banished to your hand, then you can special summon it ignoring its summoning conditions. An incredible fail spell that searches our entire monster lineup, and it has an additional upside, so we run Terraforming to search it. We also have Nightmare Pain, a continuous spell that during your main phase can destroy a dark monster in our hand or field to add a Yubel or a card that mentions it from our deck to our hand. In addition, while you control a Yubel monster, it forces your opponents to attack Yubel monsters and your opponents take any battle damage you would have taken from battles involving Yubels. Consistency is always good, and along with Grave Squirmer, Nightmare Pain is one of our main ways to trigger the destruction effects of our Yubels. But don't underestimate the damage reflection effect. It's one of our primary ways to deal damage, and it can sometimes steal games. Lastly, we have Opening the Spirit Gates, a continuous spell which when activated allows us to add a Uriah, Hormone, or Reveal or monster that mentions it from our deck to our hand, allowing it to search our Dark Beckoning Beast and vice versa. Once per turn, you can discard a card to special summon a fiend with 0 attack and defense from our graveyard, which is our entire deck. And if that wasn't enough, if you control a level 10 monster, once per turn you can add a continuous spell from your graveyard to your hand. This one card alone provides us with an incredible grind game, and while it's not technically a Yubel card, it might as well be. Other than that, we have a few generic spells in Call by the Graves, Crossout Designator and Super Polymerization, which has great synergy with our archetypal fusion. For our traps, we just have Infinite Impermanence and our continuous trap, Eternal Favorite. Once per turn, this trap lets you activate one of two effects. You can special summon one of your Yubel monsters that is banished on your graveyard, and neither player can activate cards or effects when that monster is special summoned. Or, if you control Yubel, you can instead discard one card and send this face-up card to the graveyard to fusion summon a fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from either field as material. With our archetypal fusion, this is essentially a board wipe, so it's pretty powerful. In our extra deck, we have two fusions that fill different roles. Firstly, we have our contact fusion, Phantom of Yubel. This level 9 must be special summoned by shuffling a Yubel monster and a fiend of 0 attack and defense from your hand, field, or graveyard into your deck. It cannot be used as fusion material and has the usual Yubel effects. When your opponent activates a monster effect, it has the quick effect to tribute itself to change the effect from whatever it was to your opponent destroys a Yubel monster in their hand, deck, or field, essentially acting as a monster negate that helps advance our game plan. Phantom of Yubel does a lot for the deck. Not only is it an interruption of upside, it also helps us recycle our cards from our graveyard and use cards that may be stuck in our hand. It's almost trivial to summon it, and since its summon isn't once per turn, we can often summon multiple of them to go for game. Honestly, just incredible support. Our other fusion is more situational. Yubel the Loving Defender Forever requires one Yubel monster and one or more monsters on the field to fusion summon, and it has the usual Yubel effects, although it additionally cannot be destroyed by card effects. If it is fusion summoned, it can inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each material used, and if it battled an opponent's monster, it can banish it at the end of the damage step to inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack. This Yubel serves two main purposes. Firstly, it's the primary target for Eternal Favorite and Super Polymerization. Secondly, it's one of our main ways of ending games, being one of our few in-archetype ways to proactively deal damage. While we don't go into it every game, you'll appreciate it when you do. As for our generic extra deck monsters, we have more Super Poly targets and a rank 10 package. Gustav Max and Lieb are useful to end games, while the Catalog is a great Omni-Negate that is relatively easy to access. As for Link monsters, Salamangrade Almiraj and Unchained Soul King Yama are notable to enable some of our main combos, and we have useful generic links that fit the deck. Yubel sits in a weird spot at the moment. It's undoubtedly a strong deck with a lot going for it, with its consistent and strong combos and powerful grind game, as well as unorthodox effects which may cause opponents to slip up. But there are some weaknesses holding it back. Firstly, it greatly struggles to deal with spells and traps, with most of its interaction only interacting with monsters. This means that the deck can often be blown out by sweepers, or even just spells and traps that interact poorly. In addition, the deck is relatively matchup dependent, and has trouble closing out games in matchups where its gimmicks are ineffective, although it does excel in those where they are, such as against Tenpai Dragon. Ultimately, Yubel feels like a deck that can hang with the best, but is just a step short of actually being the best, especially once players begin to figure out its gimmicks.